Hello, and welcome to today's devotional. I have been out of town for the last couple of days, and so I haven't been able to do my devotional on schedule. Um, so now I'm back, and so we're going to get today's devotional done. I was at a conference, and so um, that just took me away. But here we are. I hope you've had a good week, whatever's been going on. We're going to take a look now at Proverbs chapter 6. We're moving into the next little piece of chapter 6. If you'll recall, uh, chapter 6 is divided into these little paragraphs for the first half of the chapter, these little paragraphs. And so before I went away, we had just finished the first one of those paragraphs. And now we're moving into the second one. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing I did with that paragraph. And then I'm going to read the little paragraph. And then we'll just focus on the one verse, just as we've been doing all along. But I'm going to read the paragraph anyway, just to give the full feel of what's being said. And then we'll just focus on the individual lines each day until we're through it all. So today's focus will be verse 6, but here's the paragraph. It says, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise, which, having no chief, official, or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond, and your need like an armed man." Now, uh, this is interesting. There's a number of things we can say here. I'm going to focus on one particular thing, but let's look at verse 6 in particular. But before I do, when you're reading this, you might go, "Oh, that verse 7 says, that the ant has no chief official ruler." Well, we know that ant colonies have queens, and so there is a ruler. We call them queens. The ants don't call them queens. they that's not the point. And so sometimes people get kind of tangled in the weeds of that kind of stuff, of reading the Bible through a modern lens. This isn't saying that they don't have a particular little bug that we call the queen ant or whatever, that has a particular role in the society of the ant. But they do not have a ruler like we do. They do not have a chief or an officer or something like we do. Someone who's making policies and drafting constitutions and making declarations and organizing everybody in that way. They're, in a sense, not organized. They are organized by instinct, not by a queen who sets out a plan. This today we're going to do the garden, and next week we're going to do the compost bin, and there's none of that going on. So that's we'll get that out of the way here now, and hopefully that's understandable. But let's go to verse 6, and let's take a look at the image that we're being given. It says, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise." So what's happening here is they're using the proverb, the writer of the proverb is using the ant as an example of this wisdom that he wants to give. He wants to teach about the hazards, basically, of being a sluggard, being someone who's lazy, living lazy life. And he's going to give a warning against that. And so he uses the ant as an example. He says, "Consider this, like, take a look at this." And so that's what's happening here. Look at the ant. And what I want to focus on, even though the whole paragraph focuses on that work ethic idea, this single verse, I just want to focus for a minute in our devotional today on the idea of going to nature for wisdom. Should we do this? Should we do this often? And it's important, I think, that we understand that God does not say simply go to nature to figure everything out. Like, just look at nature, it'll tell you everything you need to know. It's not quite what's being said here. This verse is using an aspect of nature as an example to make a point. And so the wisdom can be learned in the illustration that nature gives. But we need to be careful about this. Looking to nature for wisdom has some value to it, and also has some hazards to it. And so we need to understand how to do it correctly, or else we'll fall into the hazard. So mistakes can be so when we look at the world and we want to learn things, we have to gain wisdom. It just doesn't come automatically because you watch the sunset one day and now I know how the world works. That's not how it works. We need to learn and to be able to observe things in nature, and you will learn a lot of wisdom just by observing the way the physical world works. You will, but you have to do it careful. So I want to give you 3 mistakes that people often make when they do this, and maybe it'll help you not make the mistake. But the first one is making category errors. It's very common and we see this all the way up through all the levels of education, right up to the PhD level. You'll see people make this mistake, that they'll assume one thing is equal to or is the same as something else. We can learn a lot from nature, but one thing is not another thing. So, for instance, we can do some sort of a drug test on a mouse and learn a lot, but a mouse is not a human. And so, what happens to the mouse is not automatically what's going to happen to the human. And so there's a difference there, and recognizing that difference is important, or you can make massive mistakes, not just in the area of medicine. This goes with other things. This can go in some of the soft sciences when we study the social structures of chimpanzees. So, well, they're not human, so we can learn a lot from that, but they're not human. So is this not a direct correlation in that sense? And we need to be careful in all the areas, and in wisdom, when we look at something, we go, consider the ant. Well, great, that's good. We're going to use it as an illustration for a point we're making. What the Bible is not saying is that the ant is somehow the pinnacle of of what humans should want to be. We should strive to be just like ant colonies. That would be a mistake. We end up saying, well, ants live underground all winter. We should live underground all winter. And well, that's not the point. That would be a category error, and that's not what the proverb is doing. And it would be a mistake for us to do that in our lives. So be careful about that. Another mistake we often make is forgetting that nature is flawed. And as Christians, we can make this mistake sometimes. We can look at the world and, well, this naturally happens and that naturally happens. And it's like, well, sure, lots of things naturally happen, including death. But we know that when God created the universe, death wasn't part of the picture. That came about because of sin or flaw, the error, the evil. And so when we look at nature, we have to keep that in mind, that we're not looking at the perfection. We're not looking at the world outside of humanity and saying the world is our guide to perfection. It's not. We can learn things from it. We can learn a lot from it, but it should not be held up as if it were a perfection. It's not. It's flawed. The third mistake I'll mention is that we need to use nature as an object lesson, not as a standard. We shouldn't look at things in nature and say, "Oh, this happens in nature, and so that's the standard we should achieve. We should look to." We should only ever really look at it and go, "What can I learn from that? What useful thing?" And then we try and dig that out of nature, and so we don't hold it up as if it were a standard. So that's the three mistakes I'll just warn of. I'm sure there's others, but that's three that come to mind for me. But then there's also the value of doing this, and there's a real value into looking at nature to learn wisdom. One is that it shows us principles. When we look at nature, we can learn principles of living in this world. This world is a world with physical laws and with all the things that go with that. And so we can look at things and we can go, oh, look, isn't that interesting? There's a principle there I think is transferable. Like, oh, look how the water system recycles water. Isn't that interesting? How it goes into the air and then it falls to the ground and then it's filtered by the ground and it's filtered by the evaporation process, but then it collects again and then it falls again. And we can go, look at that cycle. Isn't that interesting? And we can learn something from that cycle that can lead us to wisdom. And there's things to be gleaned from all of that. And so, but we need to understand what we're looking for is principles that we can learn of abstract things, not absolute things in like some sort of well, Gaianism kind of approach. So in this case, the proverb writer says, "Go to the ant." In other words, he's saying, "I want to use the ant as an example here, O sluggard. Take a look at the ant. Look at this and consider this." He didn't say to the sluggard, "Go to the sloth. Look at the sloth, and I want to teach you something from," because that's not the principle he's trying to glean here. And so that's an important part, and that's valuable when we do it. The process. Another thing to remember is the process of science, and I mean the process of science. I don't mean everybody that claims that they've got science on something, but the actual process of learning, observing, making a hypothesis, testing it, so on, all the stuff that goes with the process of science is actually God given. It existed long before any nobleman wrote about it. It existed way, way back when the first humans were on the planet and they started observing things and had an idea of what might happen if I do this. And they tried it and it worked or it didn't work and they learned lessons. And this process is built right into humanity. And so God expects us to look at nature, to learn. He expects us to grow and develop and to advance and to look at the world that he made and to figure it out. And so there is a real value in doing that. as Christians, we shouldn't be scared of science. We should be cautious about everybody who makes a claim, but we shouldn't be scared of the idea of science. It's a good thing. Um, and then when used as an example, the other value of nature is when used as an example, it can really help us understand abstract ideas because it brings a physical thing to it so that we can actually figure it out. And so there's a real value in using nature in an illustrative way. And so that's really valuable. And I would encourage us to use it in that way to help sort things out, but always with the caution that it's just illustration. So what do I need to do? How do I glean the wisdom out of it? So that's it for today. Just a little thought there. Looking to nature for wisdom is not a bad thing, but it's something we need to do with caution and care, just like we would do anything else in life. Tomorrow, Lord willing, we'll come back and we'll look at verse 7, and we'll examine a little more of the image and what we're being told from this example from nature. Anyways, God bless us. God bless you, and Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.